Josiah was the last of the good kings of Judah. He was sandwiched between the wickedest king and a succession of rulers who seemed ambitious for the title most evil. Josiah's grandfather was the ultra-wicked King Manasseh, who outdid all previous kings in turning to idols. He built pagan altars in the temple courtyard. Besides his blatant apostasy, Manasseh sacrificed his own children to idols, capping his wickedness. In 2 Kings chapter 21, verse 16, we find this. Moreover, Manasseh shed very much innocent blood till he had filled Jerusalem from one end to another, besides his sin, which he made Judah to sin in doing evil in the sight of the Lord. His long reign of 55 years increased the influence of Manasseh's wickedness. When he died, his son Amon took the throne and aped his father's path. A palace conspiracy saw him assassinated after only 2 years, leaving his 8-year-old son Josiah in line for the throne. Now, stewards ran the kingdom for him until he turned 16, but then Josiah took charge. He sent teams to clear the idols out of the temple in Jerusalem and all across the kingdom. Pagan altars were dismantled. Long neglect and abuse of God's temple in Jerusalem meant that it had fallen into, grievous disrepair. So Josiah commissioned its repair. And for all of this, Scripture calls him a good and a godly king. When Josiah died in an ill-advised campaign against the Egyptians, his son Jehoahaz became king and promptly returned to the idol-loving path of his great-grandfather Manasseh. Jehoahaz was replaced by his brother Eliakim, who was renamed Jehoiakim, who proved no different than his brother. He too worshipped idols, as did the subsequent kings, until the Babylonians arrived, conquered Judah, and leveled Jerusalem. Repeatedly in the narratives of that time, God's pronouncement that Judah would be conquered and go into exile was because of the wickedness of Manasseh, though Manasseh had died decades before the Babylonians arrived to carry out the sentence of judgment. For instance, we read this. Nevertheless, the Lord did not turn from the fierceness of his great wrath, with which his anger was aroused against Judah because of all the provocations with which Manasseh had provoked him. Also, I will hand them over to trouble, to all kingdoms of the earth, because of Manasseh, the son of Hezekiah, king of Judah, for what he did in Jerusalem. Josiah brought much needed religious reform to Judah. The report in 2 Kings of all that he did to erase idolatry from the land, it's remarkable. Yet, as soon as he was gone, the idols returned. And the reason why is revealed in that nod to the wickedness of Manasseh that we see so often connected to why God judged Judah. As king, Josiah had the authority and the resources to enforce reform. What Josiah did not have was the ability to effect revival. Idols may have disappeared from the landscape, but not the hearts of the people. They just went into hiding because they were officially off the table. Proof they had taken refuge in people's hearts is that as soon as Josiah was gone, the idols reappeared. The kings who followed Josiah didn't reestablish idolatry against the people's will. No, they adopted a religious policy that was aligned with what the people wanted, and they wanted idols. Josiah's reforms were good and right, but they didn't affect revival. The only thing that would end idolatry among God's people was a heart that had returned to him, and that's what revival is. As we watch our society turn increasingly secular, bowing to the modern idols of technology and ideology, many conservative Christians think that the answer is to vote suitable candidates into office so they can reform the system. And listen, reform is needed, but reform isn't enough. Because as soon as the reformers are replaced in the next election cycle, and be assured they will be, the reforms that they made will be set aside and a return to the secular status quo, because that's what most people want. We need a revival that reforms hearts, not just laws and policies. History makes clear that you can have reform without revival, but not revival without reform.